All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and yes, Arlen, we are, I believe, starting right on time, just at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. on the left coast where you are. Big football game involving the team just up the coast from you, and well, kind of on the other coast because they're in the Bay, but it's similar. Very close. San Francisco 49ers. And before we get into the who won, which I'll get to in a moment, I think most of our viewers already know, just your takeaway from watching that very exciting game that actually did go into overtime.
Yeah, I think you have two great teams, and they've had a great game, an overtime game as good as any you're going to see. And I think the difference has to be Mahoney's. I mean, he's the difference. He's the more experienced quarterback between the two teams, and he did what he was supposed to do, and I think he won it for him. He deserves all the accolades he's going to get.
No question, he played amazingly well, and there were really two superstars, it seemed, on each team, and that's no disrespect to anyone who I'm not going to identify as a superstar, but as I watched that game unfold, it seemed to me that the two Kansas City Chiefs stars, meaning of course Mahomes, who I would say is talent-wise the greatest quarterback ever. I would still put him behind Brady in the pecking order because Brady has 7 Super Bowls, and Brady beat him head-to-head more games than he lost, including in a Super Bowl, and I believe also in an AFC Championship game. So I give Tom Brady the slight edge still over Mahomes. Maybe Mahomes can't catch up with him because of the head-to-head record. But with Mahomes and Kelsey, I just want to say that Kelsey was tremendous at the end of the game. And the two 49er stars, the quarterback there, Brock Purdy, played very well. He really acquitted himself well, as did Christian McCaffrey. But it seemed to me they were just a notch below the two Chiefs stars, A and B. They didn't get quite as much support. Purdy was under a lot of pressure throughout the game, and I think that hurt.
Who's the second?
And they still almost won, Arlen. Go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who's the second player in the Chiefs you're talking about?
Travis Kelce. Taylor Swift's boyfriend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was part of the game, too, a big part, I guess. But she didn't go out on halftime with him and endorse Biden. A lot of people thought she might. So,
well, if she was some sort of a psyop, I guess she is. And I don't even know. What is a psyop? A psychological something or other? I don't even know what that term means. Yeah, what is that?
Yeah, it's just, psyching out other people, I guess. Yeah. Using psychological tactics, I guess.
Oh, I've heard the term used all the time, never even knew what it meant. So I appreciate your letting me know. That's why I call you a thought leader, Arlen. And we're always so glad to have Arlen joining us on Mondays for a spirited discussion, a spirited back and forth. We often disagree. I think we have similar goals, but we have very different views on how to achieve those goals. So it's always great to have Arlen. The big picture report, he's a pundit, he's a thought leader, and we're just talking a little bit about his team. We'll get into the sort of non-game related aspects of the Super Bowl. That intrigued me far more than what did turn out to be an excellent tilt on the Vegas fields there. So do you have a problem with how big gambling has become, Arlen? I will get to that later in the program. I just want to, Las Vegas, the NFL didn't want to go near Las Vegas with a 10-foot pole 20, 30 years ago. Now it seems as though the gamblers are almost in complete control of the game. Is that something you think about? Is that something that you worry about?
Well, it's a big change over what, the way things used to be. And certainly there could be problems. We don't know yet. There's, you could see where this could go. I mean, something happens during the game and people will say, oh, it's, because of the gamblers. And, interesting too, another aspect to think about is college football. Now that they're paying college football players, that changes things too. So, yeah, there's much too much gambling around, and it shouldn't affect the games on the field, but it probably does.
Well, the players are paid so much money now. There's so much at stake for them if they're cut, if they're banned or blacklisted from the game. My thought is they're unlikely to be enticed by gamblers because pretty much everyone on that field is making over $1 million at this point. I don't think they're going to want to risk that. And also, they're not going to want to risk the potential retirement income that they can gain. Either in media or advertising. So I'm not as concerned, perhaps, as maybe you are and others about the product being compromised. Although I certainly believe that could happen. I think my bigger concern is that this is another way that poor, struggling, and working Americans are being screwed. I mean, we're talking about people who are become gamaholics, people who think that their retirement money will come when they get the big score, either in a lotto or when they make the right, they pick, what do they call where you get an exact or whatever it is, where you keep getting a parlay, right? A parlay. That's where you pick 5, 6 right at one time. So to me, that's the bigger problem here, is that these short timers and these people who just exploit human weakness and frailty have taken over. I just think it's one more example of what's wrong with America today, and the whole world, really.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with America right now is a lot of people are, they're having addiction problems, all kinds of problems just because the way our life is lived now, and people don't have enough money. They're frustrated with so many things, and it doesn't look good. Yeah, gambling could be a problem for a lot of people. You got the fentanyl and all these other drugs that people are succumbing to. As far as gambling goes, I haven't heard any controversy about the gambling yet, but I can guarantee you that inevitably it will happen. There'll be some question about that and how it might have influenced, a game.
Yeah, again, I don't know that it's the game on the field, the product on the field that we need to worry about quite as much as just the individual gamblers, especially those from poor, struggling, and working families, people who are betting their rent money, people who are betting their kids' medicine, people who are betting their tuition. That's what I'm really most concerned about. And, some people say, well, so what? That's their problem. That's not my problem. Well, even if you have that attitude, it's your problem too, because when you have more and more needy people, you have more and more people who are desperate, then all sorts of pathologies become worse, are exacerbated. That may well impact on you, such as crime rates going up. Arlen, go ahead. Final response on that. We'll get maybe to Dave Zirin's column on this. He talks about the problems with more gambling in sports. I do recommend it, but we have so many other topics. I don't know how much time we'll have for that.
Yeah, I mean, this country's in a lot of trouble. If you look back to several decades, you didn't have these kind of homelessness, addictions, people, the kids having so many problems, so much depression and, body issues and all this kind of stuff. Our life is kind of falling apart in a lot of ways, and there's really nobody that's working to make it different. And
you're on your own, baby. You're on your own here.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. That's why I do this, because I want to unite people in support of a better future. And to me, that means we have to forcibly move away from both political parties to an alternative reality that's better than the one we have now. If you were wondering who won the game, you can see it here. The First Lady, Hillary Clinton's tweet, also, of course, Secretary of State. I don't want to refer to her as Bill's wife. She got a lot of criticism here, though, for calling Travis Kelce Taylor's boyfriend and the entire Kansas City Chiefs community. Arlen, I assume this doesn't bother you at all, this particular tweet from somebody you voted for and I think was now or had been president.
Of course, I supported her over Trump, and that was an easy call. But I hadn't really thought about Hillary in a while. I don't think she's important, whatever she says. Some people do, but I don't.
Well, again, Hillary got a lot of criticism for this tweet, and my initial reaction was, surprisingly, that there was no big deal. I mean, I'm the first person to go after Hillary Clinton. I always see the dark side in everything she does. I never give her the benefit of the doubt. And yet, to me, I read this tweet and I thought, well, maybe this is a wry commentary on the mega hype surrounding Taylor Swift, how she was, just the NFL and the sports networks just totally used her to boost their ratings and focused on her at every moment, exploited her massive popularity. I was like, well, maybe that's a little bit of a joke. Maybe that's like Hillary's kind of commenting like, yeah, she's became bigger than the game itself. And so I looked at some of the comments and I thought, well, maybe these are a little unfair. And again, nobody has ever viewed Hillary with more skepticism than I have. But I did think it could be Arlen. She's getting a raw deal. I looked at these tweets and I thought, well, maybe some of them are a little humorous, but are they fair? Hillary, this is from, by the way, Newsweek. Hillary Clinton's Super Bowl message backfires. Newsweek, of course, I believe that's a Washington Post production, maybe no longer. So surprisingly, they are critical of her. But unlike you, the Chiefs have won something, wrote one detractor. It was a little bit nasty, although she did win the U.S. Senate race twice, I believe. And also, another made note of Clinton being the wife of former President Clinton, saying, hey, Bill's wife, did you enjoy the game? So I thought maybe those were a little mean-spirited. But the fact is, Arlen, she does have a long track record of dividing us along racial lines, along gender lines, along sex lines. She does not have a track record of trying to unite people in support of economic justice. So I guess it's kind of fair. I guess in the way it is fair to slam her.
I mean, as I mentioned to you before off the air, how I think she's old news. I don't think it's that important what she says. And obviously she was trying to be light and funny and, humorous and not trying to be serious. So I don't know why anybody would object to what she said, but people do, they'll jump on her for anything, just like they'll jump on Trump. I mean, on Biden for anything,
or on Trump, to be fair, on Trump as well. Well, here's the thing. And you said she's old news, but she still keeps bringing herself back up. She keeps coming back like a zombie. So this was on, I guess it was have they had the Academy Awards? I guess they moved them up. I'm not sure. But not she yet. Was tweeting her ire, her dismay at the fact that the Barbie movie didn't win award, that the director Greta Gerwig and the star Margot Robbie didn't win Academy Awards or some kind of awards. So she, texted about that. And so again, it's, in the Barbie movie, of course, well known as kind of what do you want? A women's rights parable. It's about sexism and, how women are viewed as like Barbie dolls and how wrong that is. And so she was kind of jumping into that fray too. So again, trying to separate people based on something other than their economic interests. So I just can't, in the end, I can't criticize those who criticize her, Arlen. I have to stand firm with those who go after Hillary.
Well, Hillary's only going to get in the news for this kind of stuff only if people react to her. And there's no reason to react to her, but people love to do it and they'll continue to do it. But I just don't think she's important anymore.
Well, here's what right-winger Candace Owen wrote. This is literally why everybody hates feminism. A bunch of hyper-privileged, woke women are crying because a woman who played Barbie isn't being considered for Best Actress in an Oscars category. This is the feminist played. Okay, right. So they haven't had the Academy Awards yet, but it was the nominations. You can't argue with that. I mean, isn't this true? Hillary's complaint is that some other millionaires, Robbie and Gerwig, don't get some, ultimately kind of meaningless award. I mean, it's a big deal for the tabloids and all, but in the end, what is the Academy Awards? It's not like the Nobel Peace Prize. So she's complaining that some other hyper-privileged people, just like her, didn't get something. And that is, don't you think, honestly, all kidding aside, don't you think that turns people off? Don't you think that's why the Democratic Party is struggling? Because they've become this party of the bold-faced names and this party of the elites rather than of the working class.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that. And, people bring up these kind of issues. I think people are kind of confused about things like gender, sexuality, race and all that. It's it's becoming a little bit crazy, I think. And somebody was on Bill Maher the other night and saying, why do the Democrats keep responding to things about race and gender and all these divisive things, and it's hurting them. It's hurting them. All the things about preference to getting to universities and all that. People don't want to hear about that. And this guy who was a black guy was saying, he was a fan of Martin Luther King, as was I. And Martin Luther King, said it's your character that's most important, not the color of your skin. But we seem to have gone away from that. And
well, Dr. King certainly did focus on race. He certainly did talk about racism. He talked about injustice. He also talked about economic injustice. He talked about poverty all the time.
Yeah.
He wasn't a big believer, as far as I can tell, and I don't remember him, from my lifetime, but just from what he said and watched his speeches and what I've read. He wasn't a big believer, as you suggest, as you indicate, in programs that are explicitly targeting people for assistance based on race. He was about a level playing field when it comes to rights like voting. Everyone gets to vote. He was certainly about making sure that the deprivations that so many black people, especially in the South, were suffering were addressed. No question about it. But I don't, and I could be wrong, I'd love to read about this. I don't think he was so much about explicit targeting people for assistance based on race as much as on need and about the ways they had themselves been deprived in their lifetime. That may or may not be what Bill Maher was saying. I don't cotton much to Bill Maher either. He's a warmonger of the worst sort. But at that point, at the same time, he has shown some willingness to criticize woke politics, which I appreciate. Yeah. Well, what do you say though because the problem for you is if you want the Democrats to win, people like Hillary Clinton are making it more difficult.
Well, anytime the Democrats try to, divide the country by, anything, by race or anything else, there's going to be problems. And, you're right. It should be about working people and class and who's got the money and who isn't. And, Martin Luther King would not have cared about things like affirmative action and numbers and all that, which actually are
that's
good,
really a dispute. Let me just jump in. That's really disputed. I understand what you're saying. As far as I can tell, he never really gave any definitive statements on affirmative action. Towards the end of his life, his main focus seemed to have shifted somewhat towards a pro-peace, pro-anti, poor people's campaigns. He certainly never forgot about the plight of, as he referred to, African Americans or Black Americans, the Negro, as he referred to them. He never forgot that. It was always front and center, but he more and more joined the circumstances of the people that he, came from, his people, if you will. I hate to say it that way, with those of others who were deprived in American society.
Well, I think his theme was, it's about your character, not the color of your skin. And that, to me, always sounded right. And I don't understand why people wouldn't just accept that and go with that. But, there's apparently a lot of people who want to make money, who want to have more power by pointing out these differences and, making a big thing about, what race is doing what and all this kind of stuff. And it's just bad for the country. And I think there's a lot of the country that is not very happy hearing about it. And it's going to hurt the Democrats if they don't change their tune a little bit.
I think the way you can address this issue best is what I always say. You guarantee everyone enough and nobody too much. If everyone has health care, if everyone has a secure home in which to live, if everyone has debt-free education available to them, then the differences that you can see between yourself and others are reduced. You're more able to accept that maybe other people have a little more than you do because they won't have that much more, and you also have opportunities and your children will have opportunities. So I think the best way to reduce these kinds of tensions is through the solutions that I advocate, of course. So There you go.
Yeah.
Arlen, I want to move just quickly. We'll get, by the way, to what you were saying and the issue of racism and hatred. In a moment, there was an ad that aired during the Super Bowl by a man who apparently worked with Dr. King. He produced it. It was paid for by Robert Kraft, was the primary funder, the billionaire owner of the Patriots. We'll get to that, but I also wanted to go to the halftime show. So we're focusing on basically everything about the Super Bowl except for football. That's what we're talking about today on Halitics. I hope you'll join me as a subscriber. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button, bottom right. Arlen joining me as he almost always does on Mondays, which is certainly my honor. I'm very, very happy to have him on. This is from one of my fans. I was really glad to get this. I was really touched. I'm always touched when people try to help me out, give me advice or give me support. It always means a lot to me. And I want to just give the quick shout out to Jeff. He and I get very tense online. I get very frustrated because I don't think he's really on board my train, which is to reduce inequality and also to make life better for poor, struggling, working people. And maybe he'll disagree. I don't think he would. But he did offer me some suggestions on how to do a better live stream. I think they were presented in good faith. Jeff, thank you for that. This is from another viewer, another listener. No need to feel bad about your occasional. And I put that occasional, I highlighted that, Arlen, that occasional blue, your occasional technical problems, and very thick, heavy blue as well. I appreciate that occasional. So he's saying it's not all the time. Millions of dollars were spent, absolutely, tens of millions, I'm going to guess, at the big game, and they couldn't even get Usher's halftime audio levels right. There were some issues there, Arlen. Apparently his mic wasn't working at first, and there were some sound problems. I'll play a clip from it. I'll be honest with you, I didn't notice because I didn't watch. As soon as they went into the halftime, my wife and I took a long walk around our neighborhood. Did you get a chance, or you didn't catch the
I'm
halftime
like
show?
you. I just kind of tuned out at halftime because I'm not an Usher fan, and it's halftime show is not that important to me. It's the football game that really matters.
I would agree. I would agree with that 100%. I will say, I wouldn't have even known Usher's music. I didn't recognize him, but I played this, and I have to say it wasn't as bad as a lot of the contemporary music that I've heard, and I just can't even bear to. I guess I've heard a couple of Taylor Swift songs. I mean, I don't think she's the worst. I don't hope she doesn't auto-tune, and Usher wasn't auto-tuning here. So let's just play a little clip. I want to play this. I didn't really notice, viewer, listener, commenter, that it was so bad, but apparently others did. There was a lot of comments online about the technical problems here. I didn't notice them.
Okay.
And in all my life I keep loving that tears. Gotta care. Met this girl, turn the tables around. Listen, she called me by surprise and breaking down, yeah.
All right, so there you go, Arlen, and just had a small clip. But I give him a lot of props. First of all, it was live. It wasn't like pre-recorded. He wasn't lip syncing, which is how they knew there were problems, because there were times when you'd see his lips move, but you didn't hear any audio. You couldn't really see it in that clip because that was the NFL clip. That was the official clip, and they went back and they retouched it. But apparently there were a couple of moments in there where you heard his lips move, or you saw his lips move. You didn't hear anything. It's kind of like my show, same thing. But I didn't really notice it. The dancing was good. It's not my thing. What can I tell you? But I thought it was pretty good. And there's going to be tech problems when you're recording a concert like that, when it's all temporary, when they put all the stuff out on the field 5 minutes before he goes live. There are going to be problems.
Well, you should know about technical problems, Hal. and that's certainly a case at the halftime where, you have to be, there's a lot to consider. So, but, I didn't know much about Usher, and I'm surprised to learn he's been around for 4 decades. And apparently a lot of people do like him, but, like you and me, we're just not into that kind of music, I guess.
Well, I guess we're too old, right? I mean, I remember Peter B. Collins once said the best music is what was on the radio when you're 17. And I have to say, I concur. Well, I don't really concur because I think the best music was before I was born, when I was like -7 in the mid to late 50s. And then maybe when I was 5, 6, 7 in the 60s. So I don't quite agree with Peter B., but I don't totally disagree either. All right, let's move on. RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy made a bit of a splash last night, or at least an ad with him in it did. Before we get to this, just wanted to look real quick at the numbers here, Arlen. Who is Mapstead? Do you have any idea who Mapstead is?
I don't.
So I knew I would stump you. I didn't either. His first name is Lars. Does that help you? Lars Mapstead. Now are you like, oh, light bulb? Now I know.
Oh.
Lars Mapstead apparently is the leading contender. And I did start to think this could be right when I saw this, the leading contender for the Libertarian Party nomination. So you may see him as the Libertarian candidate in November. Or perhaps if there's a primary. I don't know if they have primaries or not, how that worked. But so that's who Lars Mapstead is. That's why I put the who, because I knew who Kennedy was. Obviously, Trump and Biden, we know who they are. Knew who Kennedy was, knew Joe Manchin. West is Cornel West. You only know who he is because I told you who he is, but you know because of that. And I assume, and well, we've talked about Jill Stein, so I know you know, but Mapstead, nobody knew. Are you surprised I ovaled the numbers there? Are not so bad for Bobby Kennedy Jr. Does that surprise you that at least in one poll, he's in double digits, Arlen?
No, it doesn't surprise me because people are going strictly by his name. I doubt that they know what he stands for, anything like that. But when you have a name like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you're going to get attention and people are going to, want to vote for that name. But hopefully, and he would be bad for Biden. I think if he was in the race, he would hurt Biden. And that's probably why, he's probably getting some support from some rich Republicans.
Well, you're absolutely right, I believe, Arlen. I mean, can't say with absolute certitude you're right, but my belief is the same as yours, that Kennedy's presence in the race hurts Biden more than Trump. And I wouldn't have thought that because Kennedy gets support from anti-vaxxers, for example, and Kennedy has been a super staunch supporter of the Israeli genocidal acts I don't call it genocide, I call it genocidal acts in Gaza. And maybe it isn't Kennedy, but if you look at the poll numbers when they have Trump versus a bunch of other candidates, here you have Biden, Kennedy, Manchin, West, Stein, and Mapstead. Trump has a significant lead. It's closer when it's just Trump v. Biden. Now, maybe Kennedy's drawing more from Trump, but if he is, then those other candidates, and I would definitely think, for example, Stein and West would draw more from Biden. But if you look at the numbers, Stein and West, they have almost no support at all. Each one gets like 1%. Maybe West gets 2 or 3 in the Wall Street Journal. They get a little bit of support, but you total them up, they're nowhere near even where Kennedy is. So regardless, more candidates does seem to favor Trump and hurt Biden.
Well, certainly these third-party candidates are going to mess up the election. They have a potential of messing up the election and interfering with the final outcome. So we don't know how it's going to turn out. I mean, who's going to be running, in a third party or it's an extra candidate. So there's so much unknown here. So, but I wish they weren't there. But in our political system, they're allowed to run, but they don't really have any chance of winning.
Well, there are known knowns and known unknowns. I mean, you could say that you don't want them there because people are given a chance to vote for the person they prefer as opposed to the person that they have no choice. They view themselves as having no choice. But you could say, for example, I voted for Jill, in 2016, I voted for Jill Stein, not because she was on the ballot. Well, if she hadn't been on the ballot, I wouldn't have voted for her, but not because she was on the ballot and otherwise I would have voted for Hillary. I wouldn't have voted for Hillary no matter what. I get it. I understand that by not voting for a candidate, I make it less likely they'll win. And
I
in that
voted
case,
for-
more likely that Trump would win. I was like, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me whether it's Trump or Hillary. That's why I'm voting for Jill Stein. And that's how I feel about this election coming up. I don't care whether it's Trump or Biden. They're both awful. I think that what Biden's complicit in when it comes to Israel and Ukraine are so bad that I don't see how Trump could be much worse. I know you feel very differently, but I'm just making the point is more about, rather than fighting about politics so much, Arlen, as why do you think people who really would say, okay, I prefer Biden to Trump, if that was your belief, if that was my belief, I'd vote for Biden. I don't feel that way. Why would someone who really does, who would vote for Biden if Jill Stein or Kennedy weren't on the ballot, why would they vote for Kennedy or Stein? I don't understand that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand my question?
Well, yeah, I do, but I think the important thing is that most people are not paying attention to what's going on in the news like you and I are, and other politicos, and so they just don't pay a whole lot of attention. They see a name they like, and it sounds good. By the way, I voted for Stein also, and that was because in California it doesn't matter who I vote for. Just like most of the other states in this country, there's only about 7 or 8 states that matter at this point, and so. As I say every week, our system is just so wrong and messed up and needs to be reformed, but you can't reform it because it's right there in the Constitution. And
well, let me ask you it this way, Arlen.
Yeah.
If you lived in Florida in 2000, and I don't mean you, Arlen Grossman, but just sort of play along with me. If let's say you lived in Florida in 2000 and you saw the names Bush, Gore, and Nader, and you said to yourself, well, I don't like Gore very much, but I really don't like W. But I also really like Ralph Nader. So I'm going to vote for Ralph Nader. Would you say that? Or would you say, I don't like Gore or Bush, but since I'm in Florida and it's really tight, and I think Bush is a lot worse, so even though I don't like Gore, I'm going to go ahead and vote for him because Nader can't win. Wouldn't that be what you'd say to yourself?
I would be more worried about the hanging chads. Those are really confusing.
Well, that was relevant too. But you see my point. Why? Yeah. I don't get the person who really does ultimately dislike the Republican a lot more who still votes for a Stein or a Nader. That I don't understand. I get it in your case because you're like, it doesn't matter in California. But if you live in a purple state, in a disputed state, why would you, I don't get that. If you really find one candidate to be far more objectionable than the other of the two major parties, why would you ever vote for a third party candidate?
Well, I don't think people were thinking about that when they voted for Nader. They didn't think it would change the election. And who knows really what happened in Florida that year, because, maybe Gore should have won and probably did win, but you have people like, Bush and all the other Republicans who were in power at the time in Florida, and they certainly swayed the election. So it's very complicated. And, we really need to have a system in which whoever gets the most votes, nationwide should be the winner, but we don't. And that's such a shame.
Well, I agree with you. And I also think we need, and I think you agree with this, we need the ranked choice so that I can vote for Jill Stein and then say, well, if I felt this way, Trump is unacceptable, so I'll vote for Biden as my second choice. I think that would be a much better system. The other thing that would be great about that system is you might find that some of these third-party candidates would do surprisingly well because many people don't vote for them because of the fear that they'll be helping the candidate they hate.
Yeah, it's certainly a problem in a lot of ways. Our elections are a problem in a lot of ways. And like I say, they need to be reformed, but they never will be because, we worship the Constitution the same way a lot of people worship the Bible, but it's way outdated and, no longer really relevant to today's world.
I think there's a lot in the Constitution that's relevant. I can't agree with you there, Arlen. I mean, the right to free speech. Come on. Sure. I mean,
there's a lot of good stuff there, but there's also a lot of stuff that, was done 250 some years ago when, the people who wrote it didn't even believe everybody should have the right to vote.
Well, I mean, what they believed is one thing. What they actually, commemorated for posterity in the document is something else. And there's a lot of tremendous beauty and value in it. And it has been a template for free people or for freedom movements around the world. Liberation movement. So I have great affection for the Constitution. I agree. It needs to be periodically updated, and we should be doing that. Unfortunately, even that is fraught because corporate interests and billionaires would pollute the process and taint it to such a degree we'd probably wind up with something far worse than the admittedly flawed but still frequently great document. All right, I want to get more. We've got so much to get through. I mentioned Bobby Kennedy. So this ad played. I want to play this ad. It's only 30 seconds. This was during the Super Bowl, and then we'll talk about what he said about it and what I have to say about it. We'll hear what Arlen has to say. So here we go.
Kennedy, 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 Kennedy.
Do you want a man for president who's seasoned through and through? A man who's old enough to know
And young enough to do.
Well, it's up to you, it's up to you. It's strictly up to you.
American Values 2024 is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
All right. So, Arlen, I was going to make a crack about how you, I'm sure, remember when that ad first aired 74 years ago, but I'm going to guess you don't remember that. That's just a tiny bit before your memory would.
Well, that ad shows you everything you need to know about it. Mainly, it's all about his name and the fact that his family doesn't even support him and thinks he's crazy. It tells you another thing about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
No, his family was very much against this ad, and he actually apologized for it. And there you go. RFK Jr. apologizes to family after Super Bowl ad. He writes, "I'm so sorry if the ad caused anyone in my family pain." He said the ad, which remained pinned at the top of his X page, which he got slammed for that. They're like, well, if you really are sorry about it, why are you having it on your X page? I actually went to that page before the program. It was no longer pinned there. So he did take it down. Now, obviously, between when this was posted at Axios and when I went to the page, he took it down. And he explained it was made without any involvement or approval from his campaign, but rather by a PAC that's organized and supportive. So here's my take, Arlen, and then I want yours. I don't care if his super privileged family is upset. I don't care. It doesn't. I think the ad itself is cheesy. It looks kind of, I'm like, really? But what really irritated me about this, Arlen, is this was an opportunity so missed. If you're going to spend $8 million or whatever it was to put that ad up, and it probably cost nothing to produce it because they just use an old ad and they use the same free software that I use to superimpose a few images over the old ones. If you're going to take all that money and give it to the Super Bowl, why don't you present Kennedy's positions? Why don't you draw a firm distinction between him and the duopoly candidates? He is good on Ukraine. He wants to get us out of Ukraine. Talk about that. You're awful on Israel. You're all in for Israel. You're all in support of the atrocities there. But hey, if you're going to actually be on TV when there's 100 million Americans plus watching, tell us how you're different. Tell us why you're the better candidate than the people you're running against. You got nothing from that ad.
Yeah, well, you got a lot. You got his name, and that's what he's running on because his policies are unpopular with a lot of people, including me, So he would just hurt himself if he gave out his policies. But if he's got that nice commercial and his Robert F. Kennedy Jr. name, then that's all.
Well, I agree. His policies are bad. Putting aside, we disagree on Ukraine. We probably pretty much agree that he's bad on Israel. He's also, his anti-vaxxer stuff, I sort of get it. I think he's gone too far with it. He's not for Medicare for all, which I completely disagree with him there. He's also not for, he couldn't say he's for raising income, top marginal tax rates. And he's also expressed questions about the climate holocaust. So he is a bad candidate in a lot of ways, just like Marianne Williamson was a bad candidate. She's dropped out. No tears shed here. all that said, Arlen, again, I'm just going to say this, and I do want a focus on this. Shouldn't you, if you're going to spend all that money and you're going to try to get people to vote for you when you're not as well known, when you're a third party candidate, don't you want the American people to get a firm idea of how you will provide, you are different than the choices that they have been considering?
No, I don't think they're thinking that way, Hal. They're just thinking, how can we best, impress the people out there who are watching? And that's what they did. They focused
Well,
on his
do you
name,
agree
and
that it was a
all that
bad
important.
idea? That wasn't the way to do it. If that's your goal, or do you seem, as he apparently does, to hold the American electorate in contempt, that somehow a 64-year-old ad is somehow more important to the American voter than where you stand on issues of war and peace or where you stand on health care?
Well, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is just not important, except how he might affect the general election and, maybe hurt Joe Biden, but as far as, he's not a Democrat, he's not a Republican. His issues are very controversial, and I certainly don't like what he stands for, and a lot of other people wouldn't either. So he's going to get a few percent of the vote, and I don't think a commercial in the Super Bowl is going to make much difference either way.
All right, Arlen. Well, you're sort of dodging and evading. You're slipping and sliding. You're doing everything possible not to answer my question, which I'm a little irritated by, because it seems to me it's kind of self-evident that if you want people to vote for you, you tell them how by electing you, you will make their lives better and different than the other candidates. And he doesn't do that. So I think it was a complete wasted opportunity.
No, I think that was what they intended to do. They intended to make him look good and, people to focus on him, give him some attention. But, that's all he could do. His policies wouldn't make much difference.
Well, then he shouldn't be running. I mean, he should recognize that but that's because everyone thinks they can get to be president by getting over on the American people. And actually, if you look at the two most recent, at actually all three of the three most recent elected presidents, all three won because they managed to convince the American people that their policies would be better than the person they were running against. It was never about personality for any of them. For Obama, certainly he presented himself as the progressive alternative to Hillary. He presented himself as a progressive alternative to McCain, a pro-peace alternative. He talked about health care. Trump won in 2016. He talked about was trade. We have to bring good jobs back. It was policy. He talked about how futile these terrible wars, these endless wars were. It was policy that got him elected. And
No.
I think it was the same for Biden as well. Biden was like, look at the it was somewhat about personality. People were sort of fed up with Trump, but I think a lot of it was that he made the case, hey, I'm going to be the president for all Americans. I'll pursue policies that are better than Trump's, and Trump's policies weren't all that great to begin with. So I think, maybe you could make the argument that Biden won on personality. Certainly Obama and Trump won on policy.
I think when you're looking at Trump, it's definitely not the policies that got him 77 million votes in 2016. It is strictly that, his personality is just so much of a con man, so overconfident, so much anti-establishment.
Well, the establishment the establishment has hurt people. The establishment, the policies that people like David Brooks champion have been very, very bad for hundreds of millions of Americans and billions of people around the world. They've been destructive and wrong. They have been evil in many cases. So people are voting against those very bad policies that the establishment pushes. So that is understandable that they would turn to Trump, who called for peace, who said, hey, I was against the Iraq war. Correctly, by the way, he said I was against it long before Hillary was. 10 years before Hillary came out and grudgingly acknowledged she was wrong about the Iraq war. And she only admitted it because she felt she had to, not because she really believed she was wrong, because she doesn't believe she's wrong. She's all in for more war with God. She's all in for permanent war in Gaza. She's all in for permanent war in Ukraine. Trump, American people don't want war. Trump was more pro-peace than Hillary. That was part of the reason he won. Americans want good jobs back in the United States. Trump was anti-trade deals. Hillary was for them. That's why Trump won. If you look at the studies, if you look at the areas where Trump won, the Great Lakes region, the Midwest, these were areas where American families have been devastated by the endless Middle East wars that both which again Trump ran against, and Obama supported, and have been devastated by the trade policies, free trade policies. So that's why Trump won. I mean, I know you don't want to believe it because you just hate Trump and you want to believe that it's only personality. But the studies show, the analyses done show that it was policy. The Democratic Party doesn't want you to know that because they don't want to ever compete on policy.
Well, people are thinking, wow, the system doesn't work for me. And he was coming up there and saying, well, I'm going to change everything. I'm going to, drain the swamp. I'm going to do all this kind of stuff, even though nothing he said was true. But
well, what do you mean he wasn't true? When he said that Americans had lost good jobs because of free trade, that was true. When he said those terrible wars that we've been fighting since 2001 or 2003, whatever, have been terrible for America, he was right. That was true. What do you mean nothing he said was true? He was right. When he said that we should tax hedge fund managers at higher rates, he was right.
Yeah, but I don't think people voted for him for his policies. I really don't. I think Biden was closer to most Americans on his policies, but Trump was just so totally different. So, not
well, Biden won. You might be right about Biden. Biden's a close call. I'm talking about Hillary. I'm talking about the first one that he won.
Oh, yeah. Well, either way, I think Trump is total personality. He's just that kind of overconfident type of candidate that people like that. They were looking for something different. So you don't think
his policy, you don't think his positions on trade, you don't think his positions on war had any relevance whatsoever? Or do you think that nobody even thought?
Not as far as getting 77 million votes. I don't think that many of his voters.
Well, obviously, there's always going to be some people who will vote based on things other than. Some people voted for John F. Kennedy because they thought he was good looking. I mean, there's always going to be other factors besides policy. But I don't think I think you ignore the policies that Trump proposed that are popular at your peril, Arlen. I think that's a very bad mistake to do that.
Well, if you ask
that's how you lose elections.
If you ask people why they voted for Trump, they would not be able to come up with any of those positions that you're talking about.
I think that many did. I don't think that's true at all. I think many actually said they said exactly what I said.
Well, we differ, but right now it's crazy because you got Biden versus Trump, and one is basically, in my opinion, fascist, and Biden is anti-fascist. So that's why I'm voting for. I would want Biden to win, although it's not my favorite candidate, and I wish they'd come up with somebody a little bit stronger and younger, but so far they haven't.
I mean, I don't know where you can say Biden's anti-fascist. He's been all in for supporting Israel's genocidal activity in Gaza. I mean, how is that? And I know Trump is as bad or would be arguably even worse with respect to Israel. He's all in for endless war in Ukraine, and that's been a disaster. So I don't know where the idea that he's somehow anti-fascist would come. Where does that come from, Arlen? His policies are so anti-democratic, so pro-war.
You have somebody like a real hostile dictator like Putin, invading a country, without provocation and trying to take it over, and the Americans have to stop that. I don't think there's any question about it. You can't let Putin take over Ukraine. That would be crazy, and it would, endanger the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, giving Putin more power.
Well, we'll talk. I'm going to talk more about this either tomorrow or on Wednesday. Tomorrow, I have Mike Hirsch joining me from PDA, which is they have several Progressive Democrats of America. We're going to talk about, and Mike is going to take the position, I think, the same one Arlen would, which is you have to vote for the Democrat in the Maryland elections coming up. I'm going to take the position, no, you don't. So we'll have Mike on tomorrow. Should be fun. Looking forward to that. Arlen, I don't agree with your framing that our choice is either to put another, after spending $75 billion in Ukraine to have the country near collapse, that we now have to spend another $60 billion to prevent Russian takeover I think that it's clear that the best way to prevent a Russian takeover is to negotiate with Russia, to sit down with Russia, to not be constantly pushing their buttons and provoking Putin. So I don't accept your framing. I think it's completely
You're kind of
wrong.
talking like Chamberlain did in 1939 or whatever.
No. I'm not saying we should just wave a red white flag and say,
Sounds
come
like you
on
are.
in. I'm saying just the opposite. We should be negotiating with Putin to come up with a reasonable solution, which includes a recognition that Russia does, for whatever, whether you want them to or not, whether you believe in it or not, Russia does demand, and understandably demands, a buffer between it and NATO. And that is just a legitimate fact that we have to recognize. In real politics, this is a very, very powerful country with a huge army, a huge military, and we don't want war with them. And we have to recognize that they have legitimate security concerns about a country like Ukraine right on their border, which is part of NATO. That's just the way it is. And if you don't want to acknowledge that, if you don't want to recognize that, then what you face is hundreds of thousands of dead and billions and billions and billions of dollars lost. And in the end, the result is going to be similar to what you would have gotten through negotiating anyway.
We could push back on Putin, and if we gave it enough effort and enough money, and
how many people are you willing to sacrifice? How many children are you willing to let die to do that? How many is it worth it? How much land are you willing to lay waste to, Arlen, for that?
Well, just because Putin doesn't like the way things are, that doesn't give him the right to just illegally, immorally invade another sovereign country.
Well, we provoked him. It's not only Putin. We did provoke Putin. We did move into Ukraine more and more. We did infiltrate it in many ways. We did push out a more pro-Russian government. And again, we are also an evil empire, just as Russia is. We have done many, many terrible, terrible things, just as we can say Russia has, and we would never tolerate a pro-Russia satellite right on our border. In fact, we didn't. We almost went to war in 1963 because of that.
Yeah, but I got to ask you this, Hal. What would Putin do if he got a hold of Ukraine and took it over? What would be his next move? Would he go?
Well, I don't think we should give him. I don't think we should agree to let Putin have Ukraine, and I don't think that's what Putin wants. He said he doesn't want it. He says he wants to negotiate. I think what he wants, as I've said it over and over, is he wants a non-NATO buffer between Russia and the West. And I think that's perfectly legitimate. And so there should be a demilitarized zone. I'd be certainly willing to talk about a demilitarized zone between Russia and on the eastern side of Ukraine, and keeping Ukraine out of NATO. That seems perfectly correct.
Well, we don't know, what
Well,
really
that we don't know because we're not sitting down and talking to him. We're not negotiating with him. We're not relying on the United Nations to do all that.
But if I had to guess, my best guess, and I'm a thought leader, is that
Well,
I think
don't
Putin
guess,
wanna-
Arlen, because too many lives are at stake for you to guess.
Yeah, but I can't see Ukraine, dying and losing their whole country, without us stepping in and trying to prevent it.
But
because
you're
it's just
you're
not right.
presenting that as the alternative. It's either the end of Ukraine, or we continue to funnel billions and billions and billions of dollars and see hundreds of thousands of lives lost. I reject the assertion, the proposition that those are the only alternatives.
Well, we
Completely
certainly
reject
don't like to
those.
see all the Ukrainians dying and all the Russians dying and everything else. None of us want that, but we,
So
just-
then why don't you say
look,
we need to negotiate with Russia? We need to sit down with Russia and with Zelensky. We need to talk about having a UN buffer between Russia and Ukraine. We need a demilitarized zone. We need to confirm for Putin that we're not going to seek to put Ukraine in NATO, because those are all ways we could hopefully prevent the war from continuing
well,
without Ukraine
I
being
think
taken
Putin
over by
wants it
Russia.
all. I think Putin wants it all. He's that kind of a person.
Well, then why don't we sit down and talk to him and find out? You can think it, but is your thought, is that sufficient to justify, again, all the lives that have been lost and that more that will be lost? I mean, Israel thinks that Hamas wants to wipe them out and push them into the sea, and maybe they do. But that thought doesn't justify what they're doing in Gaza.
Yeah, no, I'm all for negotiations, but I just don't think we're going to get much out of Putin that's going to be reasonable.
But we haven't tried. We haven't tried.
Well, then let's talk, but that's fine. If talking with a ceasefire is best of all, and you can say the same.
Of course,
thing
and that's what we should be. And I think Russia would be certainly amenable to that too. All right,
well, you don't know.
Oh, they would be amenable to it if we said, "Let's sit down. We're going to spend 2 weeks in whatever somewhere," and the leaders of the countries, the West and Russia's allies are going to sit down for 2 weeks, and we're going to stop. The forces just sit where they are. That's fine. So he's even said that. Putin pretty much even said that. Do you have a special connection?
Do you have a special?
No, he was interviewed. He just spoke with Tucker Carlson. It's in the conversation with Carlson.
Yeah.
Well, it's what he said. If he's lying, fine. We take him up on it. We say, okay, this is what you said. We want to talk too. Let's talk right now. No preconditions. We're not going to, because he said that he wanted the U.S. to stop sending arms to Ukraine. I would say to Putin, okay, you want us to stop sending arms to Ukraine. We're going to talk for 2 weeks right now. We want you to stop killing people. We'll stop killing people. We'll stop sending arms. You put your forces, you leave them just where they are. Because what we've said, our condition has been you've got to get out of Ukraine altogether before we'll talk to you. That's not going to happen. Russia didn't invade Ukraine just to get out of Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine because it wants a buffer between Ukraine and the West.
Well, I don't know how you know so much about what the Russians
because he said it. Because this is what Henry Kissinger said. Because this is what many other realpolitik people I often disagree with have said. This is what John Mearsheimer has said, that Russia will not tolerate NATO on its doorstep.
Well, I'm fine with having those negotiations and a ceasefire. I would go along with that, and I hope somebody could figure out how to get them together to do that. And of course, this, like I said, the same thing in Gaza. I mean, we need a ceasefire. We need a halt to all this killing and all these innocent people dying. And I'm disappointed in Biden for not pushing that. So we agree on that.
We do agree on that. All right, let's get to this video. This was another ad that was in yesterday's Super Bowl. Let's play it, and I'm sure Arlen and I will have wildly different takes on it.
Sometimes I imagine what I'd write today for my dear friend Martin. I'd remind people that all hate thrives on one thing: silence.
All right, I hate to stop it there because I'm really impressed that the Super Bowl had a guy who wrote or did ads with Dr. King, whose memory I still honor. But I don't agree, Arlen, that hate thrives on one thing, and that one thing is silence. I think what hate thrives on is inequality, on resentment, and maybe on ignorance. But I don't think it thrives on silence. But I want your take.
Well, I think people definitely need to speak up when these, when racist things happen, when people die just because of the color of skin or whatever. I mean, yeah, that if you have silence there, that's not good. But there's so many other things that need to be done and aren't being done.
I mean, my problem with starting the ad that way too is it puts the blame on ordinary people, on everyday Americans. Oh, it's your fault. You didn't say something. Somebody cracked a joke at the water cooler and you didn't say, stop it. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that every citizen, every American, every person has a duty to stand up every time somebody says something that, someone else is going to be offended by and attack it. I think that the problem is structural. It is not. I mean, people talk about structural racism. I think the problem is structural inequality. There's resentment, anger, bitterness because so many of us, not me, actually, I'm not one of them, but so many of us feel that we're getting a raw deal. And we're right to feel that way. Again, I'm not one of that. Well, I feel like I'm getting a raw deal because my environment is being destroyed by rich, powerful corporations. But I don't personally feel that Hal Ginsberg, am getting a raw deal. I feel like the planet's getting a raw deal. Things that I care about, things I think are beautiful. But so many Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, barely scraping by, seeing maybe a family business go under, seeing advantages go to people who look differently than they do or speak differently than they do or come from some other country or think those people are getting advantages. That's why I believe there's so much, the hatred is rising in this country. And that puts the burden on the rich and powerful, the elites, to take action to reduce wealth and income inequality. And that's the one thing they don't want to do.
And of course, it doesn't help that Donald Trump, keeps stoking all this racism and hatred. He doesn't do anything to stop it, and he makes it worse. So,
or when Hillary posts her stuff, also for that matter,
that's different. But
The
Trump,
people who will change the
obviously,
nation are those who speak out, who refuse to be bystanders, who raise their voices against injustice. When we stand up to silence, we stand up to all hate.
Right. So I think that's kind of nice. I mean, it's really well produced. I think that guy seems super cool. I'm glad he did it. But again, to me, this ad is so misguided in the sense it puts the bird in the wrong place when we are no longer silent. But it's not we. It's them. It's the people at the top. It's the elites. It's the Wall Street plutocrats. It's the offshorers. It's the gambling company profiteers. It's the leaders in both political parties that have taken action after action after action that pits us against each other and causes us to hate each other. So I am very I think this ad in the end fails. For that reason, Arlen.
When you come right down to it, the Republican Party has no interest in helping us get along together and get rid of the hate. They seem to enjoy it. I think it helps their poll numbers, and I think they're going to keep going with it until it doesn't work. So I think that's why it's so important that Trump not win.
But Arlen, you said earlier that the problem isn't just the Republican Party. You talked about Bill Maher and about these kind of woke people who talk all about affirmative action and, how we need, I guess white supremacy and things like that, that they're causing the problem too. And those aren't Republicans at all. Those are Democratic voters and Democratic leaders.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with them either. There's better ways to go about doing this, and the Democrats are not doing good enough, and the Republicans are just horrible when it comes to these issues.
Aren't they both awful because both of them are rich and powerful, and both are operated by elites, billionaire elites, or close to it, and neither one, and we'll hear from one of those billionaire elites. See how I set it all up, Arlen? We'll hear from one in just a second. Because they don't want to take the steps that are necessary to tamp down hate and anger and cause us to... Look, part of it is innate. We just naturally, biologically, are going to find those who don't look the same as the people who raised us when we were babies. There are all these studies that show that the first faces that babies see are the ones that are imprinted on them, and that's what the baby, for the rest of its life, when it becomes an adult, is going to be most loved most. And usually the first people you see are your family, right? People who look a lot like you, have skin color like you. And if you were, for the millions of years of human evolution, in villages, where the people who lived in your village or your extended community were all brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunts. So of course we are innately disposed to prefer people who look like us. But that fact is used by, it's manipulated by, it's whatever. Now, I'm losing my mind. I think I must be sort of having some sort of dementia or something, Arlen. But elites use those to manipulate us to do their bidding and not to fight against them.
You just mentioned, all the rich people, all the people who have all the money, and they're provoking all this race stuff. I don't think they give a damn about race or, all those kind of things. I think they're all about class, and so they're not
right. That's right. They don't want to talk about class. They want us to fight amongst ourselves based on differences, in innate differences like our race, our gender, our sex, our nation of origin. That's how they want us to fight. They don't want us to fight against them based on class.
Of course. And, you're just talking about the Republican Party. They're the ones that don't, that just like the way things are, where the rich are in total control. And I think the Democrats are better about that, but they could do a lot better too.
Yeah, I don't think the Democrats are better.
An ad that is about building bridges. I'm worried that in America there's a lot of hate building and we lose the special environment. This is a country that all our ancestors came to, no matter what their backgrounds, and could flourish. And now we see people.
Yeah, I want to stop it there for a sec. So that's Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots. And he says where people all could come to our country and flourish. And of course, some were able to flourish and did extremely well. And he's one of them, or his family, as if it wasn't him, his family was. And of course, he's going to want to promote that vision of America. But that's not the America that so many tens or hundreds of other millions of Americans know. They know one where their family might have been brought here in chains. They know one where their family might have come over here in return for having to work for 7 years as little better than a slave during that period of time, or had to work in a sweatshop. That's what so many America that many others know, and many others who maybe had opportunities weren't able to take advantage of them and are living paycheck to paycheck or worse. And those are the people who are all going to be angry, hateful, and resentful, not somebody whose family did get here and do extraordinarily well. But he doesn't talk about that. And why not? Because that might mean his taxes would go up.
Yeah. Well, somebody like Kraft and all these billionaires, they can see as well as you and I can that this country is falling apart. It's not what it used to be, and he's probably scared that something's going to happen and mess up the system that has done so well for him. So I can understand that.
Well, why doesn't he then support the policies that would make the country more like it was when he was growing up? Much, much higher top marginal tax rates. If he really wants things to be the way they were when people did actually make it a lot more, were much more able to make it and rise from poor to struggling to middle class, then maybe he should be, or I'll ask you this, why doesn't he support a 90+% top marginal tax rate? Why doesn't he support public universities like University of Michigan and Cal, where you can go for a few $100s in a semester? Why doesn't he support at least what we used to have, which was nonprofit healthcare? Now it's for profit. Why doesn't he support the kinds of policies that would lead to much less wealth and income inequality if he's that concerned about hate and wants things to be the way they were when things were better?
Well, certainly Kraft is not like you and he's not like me. And, one of his biggest issues is going to be keeping all his money and getting more of it. So he doesn't want, a marginal tax rate going up. So, yeah, but he's not going to like the kind of things that I like. That's for sure. And he never will.
So then isn't he part of the problem?
Yes.
Even if he votes for... Even if he votes for Hillary, even if he votes for, I don't know who he votes. I know he used to be friends with Trump. I don't know if he's voted for Trump, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, these billionaires are the ones who are basically calling the shots, and both parties are following them. Why do you think we're not talking about Israel more aid? Why is Israel just got a blank check from both? Chuck Schumer went on the floor of the Senate and started talking about how we have to support Israel and we have to support Ukraine.
Yeah, well, the bottom line, Hal, it's all about money. It's all about capitalism. It's all about, increasing wealth. Those are the values in this country. And that's just what's going to, stand out the most. And it's going to continue that way until somebody comes along and says, hey, this is not the way to work.
Well, Bernie said that, and he finally was crushed and has become part and parcel. He's swallowed up by the establishment and seems to have become part of it. So I don't know where there's reason for optimism. But let's play the rest of this clip, and then I'll let you have some final words. We've been pretty much the hour is used up. Great conversation, great back and forth.
We're breaking up into distasteful hate groups to me. Starts with anti-Semitism.
By the way, I want to stop that. It doesn't start with anti-Semitism. He's Jewish, so he's going to say that.
Sure.
It doesn't start with anti-Semitism. I don't know what groups. I mean, I'm going to assume probably African Americans, Black Americans are the ones who are targeted the most by racism. But I don't know that for a certainty. I know Jews claim that they're the biggest victims. I don't think that's anywhere close to true. I've seen far more Muslim hate and hate of Asians. But also when someone like Kraft, who's so rich, so powerful, so influential, starts whining about anti-Semitism, to me, he's going to make it more likely that people are going to be angry and hate Jews.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that, but Trump, ever since Trump came on the scene, these kind of things have gotten worse. All the prejudice and hate and distrust and the way people think about others, that's all gotten worse and will get much worse if he ever gets elected. So, but now I think people like Kraft, maybe the Wall Street Journal editorialized today that there's problems with Trump and the kind of things that he says. And they're starting to think, well, maybe he's not the best candidate and he could blow up the whole country the way things are going and not really benefit us rich people. So I think everybody's a little bit worried.
But doesn't that make him a little less noxious? If wealthy people don't like him, then maybe there's something good about him?
What's good about him?
Well, I'm just asking you, if wealthy people are afraid that he might reduce their privileges, isn't that a good thing? Because the only reason they would vote when like Trump is because they feel like their privileged place in society is in jeopardy.
Well, they like the way things are economically, and they certainly don't want this country to fall apart. In a lot of ways, it seems like it just might if Trump got elected again.
Yeah, I think things are bad either way. Here's more from Kraft.
Black, anti-Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQ+. We want to stop it all. And this blue square is a symbol of unity and solidarity to push back on all hate. And when you see this ad, it's going to feature Martin Luther King's consigliere. So I'm pretty proud of it. We worked hard on it.
All right, so I give him credit. I thought it was a pretty good ad. Actually, it was very effective.
Yeah.
So I give him credit for it. I just think the message ultimately is counterproductive if his goal really is to reduce hate. But I don't think it is. I think his goal is to have less people mad at the billionaire elites.
Well, we certainly can't rely on somebody like him to change the country for the better. There has to be some politicians, better than Trump, better than Biden, and they're not out there yet. But I'd like to see them, working to really make some changes in this country because we need a lot of change.
All right, Arlen, it's always great to talk to you. I'm glad we kind of framed this program as one around the Super Bowl or the ads in the Super Bowl and the entire zeitgeist of the Super Bowl. By the way, the word I was looking for was exploit. The elites, the establishment, use our innate fears, our bigotry, our prejudices. They exploit them for their own purposes, their own ends. My question to you, final question is, final words from you, Arlen. Do you want to promote anything, the Big Picture Report? Anything else you want to throw out there?
Look at my thebigpicturereport.com, and look at my Facebook page, and look at the Daily Cause, which prints my articles, which is good. And,
well, that's very cool. Do you have anything new up there, by the way? I haven't been checking so much. I get notifications when you post, and I know you posted something that someone else had written lately. I don't know if you wanted to mention that, but do you have anything that you've authored coming out?
Well, I did. I'm very upset about the way the Supreme Court is handling this 14th Amendment. I think it's very clear that Trump should not be running because, he led an insurrection, and that's exactly what that amendment is for. So, but there's a lot of excuses.
Okay, so let me apologize. I did see that. I'm sorry. I neglected to note you wrote that. Congratulations. That's good work, Arlen. Can tell us how to access it when you posted it.
Well, thebigpicturereport.com is,
Sure.
the first place. And, it is on Daily Cause, and I'll see if I can get it over at Op-Ed News too. But, I'll just keep trying to get my opinion across just like you are. And, hopefully Halitics would be a good place to do it too.
I hope it gets you some hits, Arlen. I kind of lied. I said you would have the last word and I let you go, but I'm still going to focus on you. It's not going to just be about me at all. It's going to be about you. It's really, really interesting to me. One thing I've noticed about you post in different places. You post at Halitics on Facebook. You post at Coast. You post the Big Picture Report, and you post at Op-Ed News. And it seems interesting because you get such different responses, right? Like the audiences, and we talk about being siloed. So tell us about that. I mean, how do you feel? Do you prefer? It's always nice to get people who agree with you, which they mostly do on Coast, right? Not 100%, but mostly. But do you feel, and you get more hits there too, it's the biggest website by far, but do you feel like you are missing out on something by not, maybe you are, I don't know, persuading others? Because I'm so much more about trying to persuade people who don't see things the way I do than I'm about preaching to the converted.
Well, I think our influence, as we both know, is very limited. It's the big people, the powers that be that really have control over this country, and we're not a part of them. So, I wish we were, but we're not. And so I'll speak out. It makes me feel better, and I'm sure it makes you feel better to get your view across. But ultimately, we don't have any clout, any power, and neither do most average people in this country, unless you have big money.
Well, if you're average, you don't have power. Yep. I mean, that's sort of the definition of average, sadly. It's ruled by the elites. You could say it's a caucustocracy, ruled by the worst. I wouldn't argue with you. You could use a different word for caca than worst, but we're ruled by the fecal matter.
I get what you're saying.
That is a word, caucustocracy. Look it up. Caucustocracy. Arlen, thanks again. It's great to see you. It's always a pleasure. I'm glad we get to do this. I'm glad we get to see each other, at least virtually. Have a great afternoon, sir.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Al. Bye-bye.